When my father raised his glass that night, I thought he was about to thank me. Instead, in front of 200 guests, he smiled and said, "Barbara tried the Air Force for a while, but the real hero in this family is Captain Holt." The room erupted in applause. My hands froze around my drink. He didn't even glance my way. People clapped for my brother-in-law, and I smiled like a good daughter should. But inside, something in me cracked. Not because he forgot what I'd done, but because he'd never wanted to know. That was the moment I realized. My father would rather be proud of a stranger in uniform than of his own daughter who'd saved lives in silence. And from that night on, I stopped waiting for his approval, until the day he was the one who bowed to me. The hall shimmered with light, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. My father stood at the center of it all, every eye fixed on him as if he were carved from the same bronze as the war memorial outside. The smell of polished wood and aftershave mixed with the faint hum of pride. I sat near the back, in a navy blue dress that helped me disappear into the crowd. He loved rooms like this, places where his voice filled the space, where admiration felt like oxygen. When he spoke, the chatter stopped. His tone carried that familiar authority that could make grown men straighten their backs. He lifted his glass high, his smile rehearsed. He thanked everyone for coming, then began listing the achievements that defined our family's legacy of service. I knew what was coming before he said it. He spoke of my brother-in-law, the decorated soldier, the man he called a true hero. The audience broke into applause, chairs scraping against the floor, faces glowing with patriotic warmth. Then came the pause, the part where I hoped, after years of silence, he'd see me, but all he added was a single line, tossed carelessly into the air, that I'd once tried the military for a while, before moving on to something respectable. The laughter that followed was soft, but sharp enough to cut through me. My smile didn't falter, but my chest ached as if someone had pulled the air from the room. My father didn't even look my way. Ryan caught my eyes. He looked sorry, embarrassed even, but his pity only made it worse. After the speeches, my father worked the room, shaking hands, retelling stories that never included me. My mother came over and whispered not to take it personally. I nodded, because arguing would have drawn more attention than I wanted. Driving home later, the roads blurred under the cold Virginia night. I didn't cry for what he said. I cried because I finally understood he'd never be proud of something he couldn't put in a speech. Somewhere on the radio, a host invited listeners to share stories of unsung heroes. I switched it off. If they only knew who Raven 6 was, maybe, for once, my father would have nothing left to say. 2 days after the party, I returned to the Veterans Hall to pack up the training materials I'd used for the community class. The place felt different without the noise. Stripped of its glitter and pride, I stacked folders in silence, grateful for the stillness, until the sound of measured footsteps echoed across the floor. A tall man stopped a few feet away. His silver hair was cropped close, his posture straight despite the years carved into him. "Whitlock? Barbara Whitlock?" he asked, his voice deep and calm, though something trembled beneath it. I nodded. He extended his hand. "Colonel Mason Greer," he said. "Kandahar, 2013. My hands froze mid-air. That name, Kandahar, wasn't just a place. It was a scar I carried quietly for years. He studied my face with an intensity that made breathing feel like a confession. Someone in my unit once told me, if it weren't for a last-minute warning from Raven 6, we'd all have been gone, he said softly. I've been looking for that name ever since. My lips parted, but no sound came. Only 2 people ever knew the name Raven 6, and one of them had died in that desert. He smiled. The kind of smile worn by men who've buried their sons. I lost mine that year, but your message saved the rest. So, thank you. He squeezed my hand before I could pull away, his grip firm but kind. Then he turned and left, leaving a faint trail of tobacco smoke and a storm I'd kept buried for a decade. That night, I opened my closet and reached for a metal box I hadn't touched in years. Inside lay a folded flag patch, a medal I never claimed, a letter signed only with initials, and an engraved plate that read, "For classified operations. Raven Echo." I'd kept it hidden through every move, every chapter of my life that demanded silence. Outside, wind beat against the windows, sharp and rhythmic, like the thud of distant rotors. It sounded like the past coming home. For the first time in years, I whispered the call sign under my breath, Raven 6, and for the first time, I wondered if my father would ever understand what that name had cost me. The next morning, someone knocked on my office door. Ryan stood there in uniform, rein on his shoulders, his jaw tight, as if he'd rehearsed the moment. "Colonel Greer told me I should thank you," he said. "He said you were Raven 6. Is it true?" I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "If you really understood what that means, Ryan, you wouldn't ask." He swallowed, nodding slowly. "Real heroes don't need witnesses," he murmured before leaving. I turned back to my desk, thinking the day would end quietly. Then my phone buzzed with news alerts. The Richmond Herald had published a feature titled "The Whitlocks, A Family Tradition of Service." The front page showed my father grinning beside Ryan, their shoulders square under the headline. I appeared blurred in the background, half turned away. The caption read, "Barbara Whitlock, the quiet daughter with nothing to prove." By noon, everyone at the university had seen it. Emails poured in, full of polite admiration. A colleague stopped me in the hallway, saying how humble I was, how proud my father must be. I smiled because that's what was expected. "He's proud," I said, "just not of me." That evening, when the building emptied and the sky turned the color of burnt copper, I found an unmarked envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Inside was a single note, written in block letters. "Thank you, Raven 6. You saved more than you know." I sat for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands, a tear landing on the word thank. It blurred the ink, spreading it into something softer, almost alive. It hit me then. The truest recognition doesn't echo in applause. It comes quietly, in the dark, from those who remember what the world chooses to forget. And in that silence, I felt seen at last. The article spread through Richmond like a sermon everyone had already decided to believe. People nodded to me in grocery aisles, told me how inspiring it was to see a family so devoted to service. They said Ryan's story made them proud to be American. Every word felt like a pin pressed into the same bruise. At the university, a student thanked me for supporting real heroes. I smiled. Pretending had become second nature. That Friday, the phone rang. My father's voice filled the line, confident and booming as ever. He said the city was honoring him at the Veterans Advocate of the Year ceremony. Reporters would be there, he bragged, and Ryan would join him on stage. He told me to dress nicely, to sit in the front row. I told him I wasn't sure I'd go. He laughed. "Don't be difficult," he said. "This is your chance to see what real honor looks like." When I hung up, I didn't feel anger, just exhaustion. The next morning, Ryan came to my door. His face was set, like a man walking into a storm. "You have to come," he said. "He'll never understand if you stay away." "Understand what?" I asked. "That truth doesn't always need to shout, but sometimes it needs to stand in the room," he said. That evening, I went. The convention center glittered under chandeliers and flags. My father thrived in places like this, rooms built for applause. I sat quietly among uniforms and camera flashes, wearing a plain black suit that drew no attention. When my father's name was called, the crowd rose to their feet. He spoke with the same polished confidence that had always commanded admiration. "The Whitlocks have always served this country with pride," he said, "and no one embodies that spirit more than my son-in-law, Captain Ryan Holt." Ryan tensed beside me, but before he could stand, a voice rose from the front row. "Mr. Whitlock, there's someone you're forgetting." The entire room turned. Major General Lewis, my former commanding officer, stood tall, his ribbons gleaming under the lights. "Your daughter served under Operation Raven Echo," he said clearly. "Her intelligence saved 70 soldiers. Some of us are alive because of her." For a heartbeat, no one moved. My father's face drained of color. Ryan's hand gripped the chair so hard his knuckles whitened. Then the cameras began to flash. I stood and walked out. I didn't rush, didn't look back. Outside, the air felt colder than I remembered. My secret, once buried, had been dragged into the open without my consent. And for the first time, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like theft. I drove east until the highway ended at the Virginia coast. The wind howled, rain slicing across the sand. I leaned against the car, letting the storm wash over me. I had kept silent out of principle, out of duty. Now that silence had become a weapon, twisted into someone else's idea of pride. Messages flooded my phone. "Are you all right?" From my mother. "I'm sorry," from Ryan. And from my father. "Come home. We need to talk." I didn't go. That night, Colonel Mason Greer called. His voice was gentle, apologetic. "Lewis shouldn't have said your name," he said. "But maybe it was time." "No," I told him. "When truth is spoken the wrong way, it turns into a lie." 3 days later, Ryan appeared at my apartment door, drenched from another storm. "You can't hide forever," he said. "He feels betrayed." I didn't lie. "Ryan, I did my job." He sank into a chair, exhausted. "I thought I knew what honor meant," he said softly. Sitting in that hall, I realized I didn't. I looked out the window at the rain. "Now you do," I said. "Honor isn't applause. It's what you do when no one claps." He nodded and left. When the door closed, I knew he finally understood. 2 days later, the Herald printed a new headline. "The Secret Hero of Richmond." Half praise, half gossip. My father called within an hour, his voice shaking. "You made me look like a fool," he said. "No," I said. "You did that yourself. Do you know what it feels like to be humiliated in public?" "Yes," I said. "2 weeks ago, you taught me, for once." I didn't apologize. The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was clean. My father finally tasted the shame he'd made me live with, and in that moment, I realized I didn't need his understanding anymore. After the ceremony, my father vanished from my life. 3 full weeks passed. No calls, no texts, just silence. My mother said he was resting, but I knew better. He was hiding from the humiliation. Around Richmond, whispers spread fast. Howard Whitlock didn't even know his daughter was a hero. Some people pitied him, others laughed. I didn't care what they said, but I knew he did. For a man like my father, reputation was oxygen. Then one afternoon, I got a call from the Veterans Council. "Ms. Whitlock, your father's resigned." They told me. He said his health isn't good. I drove to his house. When I walked in, he was standing in front of the wall that once displayed our family's legacy. Medals, photos, certificates. Ryan's pictures still gleamed proudly, but mine was gone. The pale outline where it had hung looked like a scar. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see if you're all right." "All right? You made me look like a fool," he said. "Everyone thinks I didn't even know my own daughter." I bit back the anger rising in my throat. "I didn't make them think that." "Dad, you did, when you never asked what I'd done." He slammed his hand against the table. "You know I hate lies. Why did you keep it from me?" "Because it wasn't mine to tell. I was a soldier, not a showpiece." Silence filled the room like smoke. Then he spoke, cold and deliberate. "I used to be proud because I thought you knew your place. Now I see you only care about saving face. And you," I said, "only care about saving yours in front of everyone else." I walked out, the door slamming behind me. For the first time, I saw him as small, not in size, but in spirit. That night, my mother called, her voice trembling. "Your father collapsed. Mild stroke, the doctor says. Stress and blood pressure." The phone slipped from my hand. I sat there frozen, torn between guilt and exhaustion. The fight between us had finally taken its toll. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about how far pride could push a person before it broke them completely. I reached the hospital before sunrise. My father looked fragile. The man who once commanded rooms now reduced to shallow breaths and trembling hands. When he opened his eyes, he managed a faint smile. "You came. I thought you hated me. I'm just tired." I said, "Tired of proving I don't need to prove anything." He let out a weak laugh. "I was afraid, you know. Afraid you'd outgrow me. Afraid I wasn't the strongest anymore." That was the confession I'd waited my whole life to hear. "My battlefield didn't have bullets," I whispered. "But I fought every day, quietly. And I never wanted to see that," he said, tears sliding down his face. I took his hand. "I don't need your pride, just your respect. You have it," he said softly. "And I'm ashamed it took this long." Outside, a crow called, sharp, distant. "An omen?" he asked. "A warning," I said. "It once saved lives." He smiled. Raven 6. I froze. Don't worry, he murmured. I know enough. He squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Barbara, even if no one claps. 2 weeks later, he was home again, slower but softer. As we cleaned his study, he pulled out the photo he'd taken down, wiped the dust, and hung it back on the wall. Every time I see it, he said, I see a woman who never needed to prove her strength. And I smiled. You just did. For the first time, we laughed together, and the sound of it felt like peace. A month after my father came home from the hospital, a letter arrived from the Department of Defense. It was brief. To Ms. Barbara Whitlock, in recognition of her classified service under Operation Raven Echo. You are invited to a private commendation ceremony. Attendance? Optional. That last line made me laugh. My whole life had been built around what couldn't be said. Now, even my recognition came quietly. I wasn't going to attend. But Ryan came to my father's house and placed his pressed uniform on the table. They're holding it at the Pentagon, he said. No cameras, no press. But you deserve to be there. My father, seated on the couch, added softly, If you go, I'll go with you. The ceremony was small, golden lit, and wordless. A handful of officers stood as the name Raven 6 was read aloud. When the general said, Her insight prevented a massacre in 2013, I bowed my head, feeling both seen and unseen at once. When I looked up, my father stood at the back. His eyes were wet. He lifted his hand and bowed. No speech, no applause. Just that single gesture, quiet and full of grace. It was the moment the world finally turned upright again. A few months after the Pentagon ceremony, the Richmond Veterans Council held its annual Memorial Day event. My father, still frail but steadier on his feet, had been asked to speak. When he called to tell me, I hesitated. He sensed it instantly and said, Don't think of it as doing this for me. Think of it as doing it for yourself. The hall was full that morning, veterans in uniform, families clutching flowers, the local press waiting for a soundbite. When my father stepped to the podium, the room fell silent. For the first time in my life, his voice didn't try to fill the space. It simply carried truth. I've learned something late in life, he began. There are two kinds of heroes. The first wear medals on their chests. The second carry secrets in their hearts. And I've had the honor of being the father of the latter. Applause broke through the stillness, rising like a wave. I lowered my head, tears blurring my vision. No one else knew who he meant. But I did. Then, in front of everyone, my father looked down at me from the stage and bowed. Deep, deliberate, unguarded. The same man who once embarrassed me in a crowd now humbled himself before one. Afterward, as people filed out, he reached for my hand. Barbara, I've never been prouder. Not because you're Raven 6, but because you never needed to be anyone else to be right. My throat tightened. I only wanted you to see, I whispered. Sometimes silence is loyalty. He nodded, his voice soft. I understand now, and I won't forget. A year later, I received an invitation from West Point to teach a course called Invisible Intelligence Operations. I accepted. On the first day, I stood before the cadets and projected the opening slide. It read, Dedicated to my father, who taught me that pride means nothing without understanding. The room fell silent for a moment. Then soft applause followed. I caught my reflection in the glass, steady, calm, free. For the first time, I wasn't defined by silence. I had made peace with it. That evening, I visited home. My father was at his old desk, rewriting one of his speeches. I saw him cross out Ryan Holt, the real hero, and replace it with trembling words. My daughter, Barbara, the quiet strength behind our family's honor. I rested a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to write that, I said. He smiled. I do. I was wrong for too long. We stepped outside. The lake caught the last light of sunset. Overhead, a flock of ravens crossed the sky. Hear that? He asked. I nodded. It's the sound of pride, he said. And for once, I believed him.